Is that me? But anyway, thank you very much for those words. First of all, I'd like to say good evening. And I'd like to welcome you here to this 11th Nita Barrow lecture. And at this particular point in time, I'd like to thank you for coming and to listen to the realities from Southern Africa, particularly from my country, Malawi. Before I go into the actual lecture itself, I'd like to thank a few people for making it possible that this lecture happens, for making it possible that I'm found here to do this lecture. First of all, of course, I'd like to thank the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, OISE, through the Center for Women's Studies in Education. And in particular, I'd like to thank Paula, I'd like to thank Angie, who, well, I call her these days Angie, but when I first used to interact with her on email, I used to be like, oh, Professor Miles, you know, But I'd like to thank Angie, whom I'm very, very fond of, and for her passion for the Nita Barrow visitorship, for her belief in women from the Global South, that we too have a space to effectively contribute to the whole global agenda of women's rights. So thank you very much, Angie. I'd like to thank Sarah, my friend Sarah, for her belief in me and for nominating me to be the visitor for this year. And, basically, just to say thank you very much for that. As I got here, of course, I've had a lot of help and support, to working here. But I've also I've been amazed by the work of Savi, Stephanie, and Jessica. And by just mentioning, let's do this, and I find that they've done a lot of things. I'll be like, my God, you guys have done all this? So I really want to thank you. All I did is just to prepare for the lecture. I never had to lift a finger, so thank you for that. Yes. Anyway, so before I now go into that, then of course it's the funders, IDRC and Plan Canada, for making it possible to be here. I know the support went to the Center for Women's Education, but it made possible for me to be here. So thank you very much. Now, my lecture is going to focus on HIV/AIDS. The organization that I work for, Women and Law in Southern Africa, Research and Educational Trust, is a research organization. It's been existing in Southern Africa for over 20 years, particularly in 6 countries. The 7th country being Malawi, which came into the WILSA, to the WILSA network a little bit later on, and I'll explain reasons why. What had happened was that about 20 years ago, I think we talk about around 1987, a number of academics and activists sat around together and looked at some of the literature that had been produced in Southern Africa about Southern African women. And they also looked at the laws and policies that existed at the time, which were supposed to respond to the Southern African women's realities. And there was a disjunction between policy and reality. And even the literature itself had been written by people from the North. It came from a colonial agenda. It was about what I call the othering of others, talking about them vis-a-vis us. So they took matters into their own hands and said, we will write about our experiences as Southern African women. We document our lived realities, and the purpose of which was to inform policy and legal reform, so that law, policy, the transfer of resources should reflect the realities of women on the ground. So, for example, the first research that was undertaken then in 1987 was about maintenance of children born outside marriage, what you call here, I think it's alimony? Yes, alimony. You find that in those days, when you looked at the law, you found out that the law was saying in most Southern African countries that alimony was about $10, the equivalent of $10 a month. But then in reality, that just did not augur well. So WILSA countries decided to do a research that understood what are the dynamics of children born outside marriage, what are the dynamics of single parents, and came up with a research to inform policy change. In all of these countries, except for Malawi, up until 1998 when Malawi became a member country, in all these countries, that is Zambia, Lesotho, Swaziland, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Botswana, The law has since changed. It took 5 years for the law from 1987 to change, to reflect, of course, the realities. And when Malawi came on board, that was the agenda. So the agenda continues. So in Malawi, OISE has been there for about 10 years now. We've been there for about 10 years. And with the very same purpose of informing policy, of documenting the lived realities of our people, the lived realities of us as African women. So that's basically the reason why Women and Law in Southern Africa was set up. And it continues to exist based on reasons. So we inform policy, we do research, we document, inform policy, change policy, rather than just document. We go further and challenge the status quo, as we call it. So, having given you this background, one of the recent researches we've done is on the feminization of HIV. We've done 2 pieces of research on HIV/AIDS as a grounded reality from the perspective of women, as well as the response that HIV/AIDS, the national response that HIV/AIDS is having, to see whether, again, the grounded experiences of women tally with the resources as well as with the policy response. So today I'm going to discuss this. But later on I'll also discuss some of the strategies that Women and Law has undertaken to respond to those, to the realities of African women. But I'm also going to pose a few challenges to you as the audience, as well as to our governments. When I say our governments, I mean our own African governments, as well as your governments. When I say your, I'm assuming the majority of you come from Canada, North America, Europe. So that's what I mean by your. So, but I know not everyone is like that. So basically that's the basis of the lecture. Now, in Malawi, the HIV prevalence rate is at 14% average. And out of the 14%, it's 58% of those living with HIV/AIDS are women. And this pattern runs across, with slight differentials, runs across Southern Africa. In fact, as you all know, Southern Africa is the epicenter of the epidemic. Not that it doesn't exist elsewhere. I don't mean that but Southern Africa, I always call it, this is our disease, this is our thing. That's a fact, that's a reality of the matter. So, the awareness doesn't stop about Southern Africa, it also goes to the awareness as Southern African women, because of its feminized nature. You know, the fact that we as Southern African women are overrepresented among those who are living with HIV/AIDS. You know, I've given you the statistics of 58%. But over and above that, apart from overrepresentation of us living with the virus in our bodies, it also has a greater impact on us. What I mean by that is that we in Southern Africa, particularly we women, are expected to look after the sick. You know, if you are working, you take your leave days off to go and look after sick people. You know, you have to provide for your families. You know, if it's a girl child, she's the first one to get out of school in order to help with the home if there's a sickness. So the impact is really on us as women. Now, having said that, why are we overrepresented among those living with HIV as women? The reasons are very, very simple. It's not a very, very complicated thing, although in some circles people want to pretend it's complicated. And in some circles people want to pretend it's not there. But let's put it this way. If we look at the construction of poverty in Southern Africa, particularly in the country I come from, Zimbabwe I know is in that area, Zambia I know is in that area, you find out that in terms of poverty statistics, yes, these are generally very, very poor countries. And I'll speak particularly for my country, very, very poor country. But you find out that even when you look at the poverty statistics, again, women are overrepresented among the poor. In fact, the Integrated Household Survey that has just been done by the government of Malawi recently categorically states and analyzes female-headed households as very poor. So not only are we overrepresented among those living with HIV, we are also overrepresented among those who are poor. Now, the argument I'm posing here is that HIV/AIDS thrives on poverty. It thrives on powerlessness. It thrives on voicelessness. That's why it is a disease of the poor as far as I'm concerned. So you find out because of the poverty elements that are there, women tend to take certain decisions that are high risk. There is a perception among women that men are the providers. First of all, you have to understand there is a perception that men are the providers. So, because men are the providers, we as women, we tend to go to men to ask for money. And because we are overrepresented among the poor, you find out that conditions of asking for money and getting the money surround sex as a construct. So women are not able to effectively negotiate for good sex or safer sex or whatever. If you are going to use sex as a model of getting money, obviously the power lies on the other side of who is giving you the money. So you find that women take high-risk decisions, in order to access money in so many forms.